We'll go live. Ticket.
So we are live now. I'm Mohona Chatterjee, project lead of the Story Project 9 at www.tellmeyourstory.biz. Welcome you to the last episode of the Dandakarana series. I'm a student of history and currently pursuing my PhD on the partition refugees who were rehabilitated in the Dandakarana region. Tell Me a Story calls for submission of poetry and short stories on the writing from Dandakaranya. Today's topic is fear factor, discomfort and resistance in exploring the unknown. Dandakarana is a fearful place in mythology, frequented by Rakshasa. In the more modern world, Dandakarana represents the fear of isolation and danger associated with it. An obvious interpretation, thus, is the natural human tendency which always discomforted and afraid of the unknown. This panel discussion will explain how this resistance ultimately takes a backseat when people are brave enough to embrace the change. In deserting the old orthodoxy, that is how the idea of Dandakarana can be relieved from the fear factors associated with it. I'm privileged to have with us Tanushri Podar ma'am and Sutapa Vasu ma'am this evening, and I take this opportunity to introduce our esteemed panelists to the audience. Unfortunately, Ananya Mukherjee ma'am, who was supposed to join us this evening and become our panelist, wouldn't be able to join us due to a medical emergency in her family. We wish for a speedy recovery of our family members. Tanushri Podar worked in the corporate sector before she quit to write. A well known travel writer and novelist, she has written many non fiction books before publishing 15 novels. Among her work are Noor Jahan's daughter, Boots Bells Beats, On the Double, Escape from Heaven, Solo in Singapore, The Teenage Diary of Rani Lakshmibai, The Girl in Green, Spooky Diaries, and much more. Decoding the Feronia Files, written by her, is the first Indian cli-fi thriller. Three of her books are being adapted into web series. Sutapa Vasu is a award-winning author, poet, educationist, and writing coach. Her bestseller historical novel is Padmavati. Other books are The Legend of Genghis Khan, The Curse of Nadi Shah, Out of the Blue, Princess, Monster and Magical Creatures, a translation of the 100-year-old iconic Thakumar Chuli, and much more. Her short stories and poems appear in renowned anthologies, websites, and print magazines. Now let us proceed to the question answers. The first question is the common question that is addressed to both the speakers. An author is emotionally involved in his or her work. Writing on genres like horror and thriller, which deals with the psychology of fear, makes the author go through the spectrum of fear themselves while trying to position the reaction of the fictional character in his or her book. Please tell us your experience with reference to your books like Spooky Stories for Tanushri ma'am and The Cursed Inheritance for Shutapa ma'am. Tanushri ma'am, can you please start to this question? And then Shutapa
Thank
ma'am
you.
will ask. Uh, over to you,
Thank
ma'am.
you very much. And I thank Tell Me Your Story for giving me this opportunity to be on the panel. And I look forward to a nice, dazzling evening with Sutta Babasu and Mohan. Answering your question now, writing horror is a different ballgame altogether. Writing any book is quite difficult, but I think writing horror takes a lot of guts in the sense that first you have to imagine what will scare you, and then you have to imagine what will scare the people. So you make an amalgamation of both, balance out both sides. So you really don't want to, at least I don't want to, put the fear too much embedded in, I mean, I don't want to embed it into the psyche. And my book was written for young adults. So keeping that factor in mind, it was more important for me to step warily. And basically, Spooky Stories is a collection of 13 stories. And I have placed them in historical, reference, given it historical references. And they have some kind of a historical background to their theme, main theme. So, in a way, it was a building up of a historical event and a place and creating the kind of atmosphere that is believed to be there already, because these are all stories with the known places, and known ghosts residing in those places with a little twist of my own. So basically, when you write horror, one thing that I like to keep in mind is that I try to keep myself away from the well trodden path of, those scary black cats jumping from one wall to the other, the bell suddenly ringing at night, and the lamp going out, and all those, the factors that, or the elements that we have really been used to by now. Watching some Ramsey horror movies or English horror movies, and reading some books. And basically, I'm not a very hardcore spooky sort of reader. I don't like hardcore violence or even fear, for that matter. So I try to be quite gentle in both the cases. I do write thrillers, but my murders are more cerebral than physical. So similarly, even the fear that I have created is a little different. It is more atmospheric, and it is more to do with the mind. So that is what I kept in mind while working on these stories, because fear is a factor that plays in minds. It is basically our mind, how we imagine things and how we take them forward. So, keeping that in mind, I have created these 13 stories.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Your book sounds really interesting. I'll get a copy of it as soon as possible. So now I'd request
Thank you.
Sutapa ma'am to share her experience. Over to you, ma'am.
I would first like to say good evening to all the viewers and a big thank you to. There is an echo, is it, Mohana? Is there an echo
Yes,
coming?
yes, ma'am. A
Okay,
kind of echo is.
okay. I think now it's fine.
I'm
Yeah.
I am muting my mic. If it's you
Okay,
see, it's better.
okay. So a very big thank you. Tell me your story to Coral and to Mohana for this opportunity of being here with Tanushri and at this this chat show. So you were talking about my book, The Cursed Inheritance. That is this book. Now, The Cursed Inheritance is a first person narrative where the entire story is told as witnessed by the protagonist, who is also a young girl. The complete ambience of the story is created through her emotions. It was absolutely essential that for the duration of when I was writing the story and making the tale, I become the protagonist. So only then could I bring out the authenticity to, bring out authenticity to her experiences, whether they were of horror or they were of fear or any other. Now, my intention while I was writing the story is to put the reader in the protagonist's place, in the protagonist's shoes, and feel her horror, her fear, her disgust as she slowly uncovers how monstrous her own grandfather was. Each time a layer is peeled off, she just recoils absolutely in hatred at that discovery. So, to make these emotions real and to make the reader feel those in the core of their beings, I had to become the protagonist, while writing the story and actually feel those emotions myself first. And so, yes, I did feel the horror, I did feel the fear, and I did feel the disgust. Only then I could convey them to my readers realistically. The other thing is that I wanted to create a sharp contrast, between the evil that is represented by the grandfather and the goodness that is symbolized by this young girl, the young protagonist. So my goal was to make the reader sink, helplessly into the dark corruption of an immoral, evil personality, and then be rescued by the protagonist's integrity, morality, courage, which would be shining like a light, in the darkness. Only then could I leave an unforgettable impression on the protagonist's mind as the story is concerned. So, yes, I do try to feel the same emotions that I would want my protagonist to feel, and I would want it to be reflected in my reader's mind.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I can totally understand, though I have never written anything on horror or anything in general, but I have had some, we all have some horror dreams or some dark dreams, and we just wish to wake up from those dreams as fast as possible. And now, when you guys are writing, you are relieving like a horror dream like for many months until your project is complete, and that is a very challenging thing, I believe. And hats off to you both through because you have lived through a horror dream for like months, and that's really commendable. Thanks to both of you. Now my next question would be addressed to Tanushri ma'am. Ma'am, you quit the corporate sector to become an author. Quitting a stable job is quite a fearful proposition for most people. There are many uncertainties. Due to this fear, many people even lose wonderful opportunities in their lives. From your own experience, can you please elaborate on the psychology of fear associated with quitting stable jobs? Please let us know how you manage to put your fears behind. Over to you, ma'am. Ma'am, you're muted. Ma'am, your mic is muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am, I can hear you.
Okay. You're right, Mohana. As human beings, we all fear the unknown. We like to live in our own comfort zones. And that makes us very, very comfortable, secure, and, it's a warm place. Whereas the fear that comes from treading unknown grounds and unknown spaces is very cold. It is unwelcoming. It is very anxious, moment for us when we step into such a space. So I would say that every human has fears. We all live in that boundary of fearful, insecurities, whether it comes from relationships, untested areas of our work, or living spaces, whichever. Even when you want to go somewhere, some other place, say to stay in another town or city or country, it's always that anxiety, that fear of what will happen. How will I be comfortable there? What will happen to me? So, same with the job. We are all shackled by that fear, and that prevents us from, stepping into other fields. When I took that decision, a lot of people advised me against it. They said, "Why are you leaving such a good job?" Because I was working as an HR executive with Larsen and Toubro, which is one of the biggest companies in the country. And it is a great place to work from. And the job was great. The people around me were great. And yet I chose to step out of that area and embrace a field which I really had only stepped in gingerly because I used to do freelancing. I was a freelancer much before, I gave up my job and took up full-fledged, writing career. And there were two reasons for that. One, that I loved writing. That has been, a love that I have nurtured since my childhood. I have been writing for a long time. So I felt shackled by a daytime job, which demanded so much from me because every job is very demanding. There is no job in the world which can be called undemanding. So here I was, dealing with people, their problem, the HR things that, and there was a lot of dissatisfaction in people when they didn't get the amount they felt they were, they thought they deserved. So there were a lot of factors which can become quite daunting at times. But that was not the only reason. The reason was that I wanted to devote myself fully. And I found I was not able to do justice to both the things, my HR career and my writing. So that was one. And the second thing which galvanized me and I took the step was that I was married to an army officer. And I had the option of either going around the country with him and, being there at the thick of action, or I had the choice of stepping back and just living in a place with my job secure environment and, comfortable niche. But then I thought it would be better for me because I have been a little, sort of fearless, I would say, right from my childhood. At least I find till my youth, I had very little fear of anything. There were so many instances when I did so many things which others won't. When I was like about, say, 6, 7 years old, and the children would come for my birthdays, and we lived in a cantonment with a lot of expanses, open expanses, where children were afraid to go after dark. I would go and leave each and every friend of mine individually in their houses and come back to my house, where I was that kind of a person. So it grew on me. Over a period of time, I grew bolder and bolder and tackled things which others feared to tackle. So perhaps that gave me the courage to do something which is always different. Even in my writing, I cover different genres. I step into unknown territories all the time because that's a challenge and I love challenges. So getting out of a secure job proved to be a challenge, but at that same time, I wasn't really fearful about it.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I believe you are a wonderful example of what beautiful things can happen in life if you put behind your fears and go ahead with your dreams. Thank you so much, ma'am. So now my next question is for Sukapa ma'am. Ma'am, you have translated Thakumar Jhuli, which is an anthology of Bengali folk tales dealing with monsters and magic. Translating such a classic to a global audience must have been a very difficult work. What are the fears that you came across while doing such a challenging job? Please tell us about the making of the book and some of the crucial decisions that you may have taken in terms of content. Over to you, ma'am.
So, Mohana, you're right. Translating Thakuma Chuli was a humongous job, and you will have to indulge me with a little bit of time because there were many challenges, and I will just sort of talk about the most significant ones. Now, the first significant challenge that I faced was how could I express the same ideas that were there in the original text while not losing any of their charm and aura. I mean, don't forget that this book, the original Thakuma Chuli, has been popular for the last 100 years. So obviously, it was for me a huge, it was a heritage book which I was sort of translating. And obviously, I would have also liked that my book, gets that popular. But would I be able to do it? Would I be able to actually translate and retain, the aura, the ambience, the charm of those stories? That was one really big challenge. Another challenge was the language because I was translating, I was not transliterating. Therefore, I had to be very careful that I must adhere to the impressions, the emotions, the ambience of the original work and find their equivalent expressions as closely related to the original in the English language, which is not easy at all because Bengali and English are two very evolved languages, and it's not always possible to find an equivalent. So then I had to spend hours to find an exact word that would reflect the specific expression, and sometimes I had to give up and look for a compromise. Also, the target audience were young children, so I had to make sure that the language needed was within their linguistic abilities. That also I had to keep in mind. Another fear was to navigate outdated ideas and social environment. How would I do that? Now, original Thakuma Chuli reflects the environment in which it was first conceived. Would those conventions seem incomprehensible to young children today, young readers today? Well, when I thought over it, and I spoke to some of the children. Fortunately, I do have access to a lot of children because of my role as an educationist. I realized that it was necessary for children to be aware of what were the social attitudes and social environment more than 100 years ago. Only when they become conscious of how much society, traditions, and beliefs of people have changed since then will they understand in how much better the world is in which we are living today. I mean, you have to give them a basis for comparison. So that way, I think, I could retain a lot of the traditional conventions. only when I, there were some misguided customs, that is which I tried to, very, very subtly do away with, or I try to dilute, patriarchal ideas. And I just very, very passively and very carefully, I introduced themes of feminism, sprinkled important values such as friendship, helping others, forgiveness, feeling remorse, and the good being rewarded and the evil being punished, but in a very non-didactic style. I did not want to preach. I want this, the book is for enjoyment and the pleasure of reading, and I wanted that to remain. And I also believe that young readers are excellent judges of what is right and what is wrong, so I just left it to their judgments. So these were some of the main challenges that I had while I was translating Takuma, and I'm glad that not only readers, their parents and their grandparents have got back to me saying that, oh, we really love the translation, and we are going all out and reading it and gifting it to our grandchildren. I mean, it was so strange that there were so many grandparents who are Bengali who got back to me and said that, our grandchildren don't read Bengali. So it was so good that you have translated this in English, and now they can read it and they can enjoy the same stories that we enjoyed when we were children.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for doing so much an amazing work. And you have shown what a responsible authorship is. Because, as you have said, this story was written hundred of years back, and many things have changed. And there is also the patriarchal element. So you have not just written recreated a very popular book, but you have also put the moral element with it in the current standard, and that is something really great. Thanks, really thank you to you, ma'am. So now my question is for Tanushri ma'am. Decoding the Feronia Files, written by you, is the first Indian Cli-fi thriller. Please tell us about the book. Doing something for the first time is generally associated with fear, as the chances of failure are quite high. Normally, people prefer to stay in their comfort zone and also try to play their cards in the preferred zones. In this respect, can you please elaborate on these fears of how on the fears associates itself with the things unexplored and how you broke the barriers? Over to you, ma'am. Ma'am, you're muted. Ma'am, your mic.
The biggest biggest fear that human beings, find themselves facing is the fear of failure. And that fear of failure is what, makes us hold back. It sort of shackles our feet, it sort of paralyzes us. We don't want to step beyond the known areas. So, for me, writing has always been a bit of a experiment, challenge, and perhaps I've always wanted unconsciously to break out of the zone that I get comfortable with. And because of that, I have written in military, thrillers, then, crime, then I have written historicals, and I have also written spooky stories. So basically, the whole idea is to challenge myself constantly and break out of that fear, the shackles of fear, and, face the unknown. Because, like I said, I love challenges. I am a little bit of an adventurous soul, though with age, I think I'm getting a little more fearful than I ever was. But ultimately, I like to experiment with different genres. So, when I started thinking about the climatic changes and the weather patterns around us, which is a very big issue these days globally, it's, if you see the devastation that has been caused by the changes in our climates and the kind of patterns that has set our crops dwindling and caused so many infections all around the world, so many pandemics are coming up, and whole lot of things that are happening due to the weather changes around us. Now that was a very interesting concept which I came across this while actually researching for another book. Now Cli-fi is actually climate fiction. It is fiction about climate. And very few people in the world are actually attempting to write in this genre. And in India, there are very few people who have still, stepped into this area. But then I feel it's time that an author took the responsibility of making people aware, to spread the awareness about the kind of things that are happening around us. And in the course of my research, I found that there was something which the US had started, and it was known as a HARP, a project which it had undertaken with its Navy and the armed forces and scientific departments. Now, this was a project through which they were trying to change the weather patterns in other places because they didn't want to, experiment in their own country. They were carrying out experiments outside US. Now, what happened is that we saw a whole lot of changes like sudden snowfall in deserts, sudden, tsunamis, and unprecedented levels of water rise in the oceans, and whole lot of changes that were taking place. And these are facts. They have been documented. We came across about a dozen such cases with dates, and which I have given out in my book with the dates, the occurrences, the countries where it happened, the incident in particular. Now, my premise was that if I start writing a cli-fi with the hard facts, it may become boring. The reader may not understand the concept or, read it. So I wanted to change it into a thriller so that, thrillers are very popular. We all like to know what happened next. So my book starts with a premise because, see, HARP was shut down due to a lot of protests all around. The EU countries protested about the project, and there was a whole lot of repercussion, because of which US announced that they're shutting down the project. But did it really shut down? My premise was it didn't, and my book starts from that step, that it did not shut down because there were a lot of scientists who were working on the project. And what happened to them? They were not all going to be absorbed in different departments in the US or whatever. In my book, I have shown a group of rogue scientists who broke away and they started experimenting on their own, causing devastation around the world. And that's where the book takes off. But the fact that it was something I was doing out of the normal genre was there. Yes, there were fears about its acceptance because, let's face it, because there are not so many books in our country on those, in that genre, there might be a little bit of resistance. It may not become, suddenly popular or whatever. So that fear was there, which I think every writer faces at uh, every time they take out a book. I think that fear is there. The acceptance of the book written by you is always a question mark. So to that extent, yes, I had my fears. But then I was contacted with by the person who really coined the term cli-fi, and I was so delighted because he emailed me and he said, there are very few people in your country writing about this particular thing. And I'm so happy that you have written. So that was a highlight of my writing. And I think whether the book does well or doesn't well is not in my hands. But I have done something which I believed in, and I hope people will also accept it the way it is.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Like you have tried on a whole new different genre, and hats off to you for having this courage. And it looks so amazing and interesting. I'll definitely get a copy of it as soon as possible. Now, my next question is for Sutapa ma'am. Ma'am, you have written historical novels like Padmavati. From your personal experience, do you think a historical novel can be more fearful and challenging compared to other genres, as people are normally very sensitive to their histories? Over to you, ma'am.
So, Mona, yes, one does need to be very careful of contemporary sentiments when you're writing historical novels. And Padmavati which you have mentioned is an excellent case study, because I was aware that the sensitive areas were the idea of Johar and the social discrimination of women of that period. So what I decided to do is to, you know, catch the bull by the horns. The kind of place that Padmavati holds in history today has to make her an extraordinary woman, when she lived. So I went about creating that special woman first, who was self-confident, wise, and who was spiritually enabled. Every event in the story involving her happened due to her own decisions. Even when she was showing herself to Khalji, or when she decided to rescue her husband when he was, captured by the invader, they were all her own decisions. So I show her as a very decisive person who can, sort of change her own destiny. At the same time, she was living in a very patriarchal, a very conservative kind of society in the palace, in the fort in Chittor. But at the same time, within those parameters, within those restrictions, she was able to create a kind of atmosphere and environment which brought about an improvement, in fact, in the villagers who were staying there, and in the kingdom and in the palace. So that is how I show that she was a person who was much above the people who were around her, much above the contemporaries. So, when it came to the scene of the Johar, she sat on the Johar pyre. It was her own decision. And with this, the courage that she had to sit on that, probably because she existed in a much higher spiritual plane. So that is how I, without saying too much, I was able to give a kind of explanation to why did she decide to do the Johar, why did she decide to do the other things as well, and bring her out of that restriction. And I must admit that even today, despite the furore over Padmavat, the movie. In fact, my book Padmavati was launched a few days, a week or so before the release of the film. And till today, not a single word of criticism has come against Padmavati. And it is still very popular today with all the readers.
Congratulations to you, ma'am, for that, and for like taking such a huge steps and not being fearful of the popular notions, like what people would say. And I think such beautiful things happen only when you have the courage to break out of the boundaries and take these amazing steps. Okay, and I would like to really thank you for that. So now my next question is for Tanushri, ma'am. Ma'am, three of your books are being adopted into web series. Congratulations for that. Book to film adaptation lead to constant comparison between the two very different creative arts. How, however, however, it is worth mentioning that films are the richer sister and books are the poorer sister. Books are a lonely journey. Films are collaborative. Does that bother you that your story will be no longer yours? Over to you, ma'am.
Mohana, that's a question we all face whenever, a book has to go for adaptation. I have a very simple theory on this. A book is with the author till you sign it away, the rights of it to the producer of the whatever movie or web series. Once it is signed, you really don't have any control over it. Honestly, I wonder if any of the books or any of the producers has been so true to the book. Most of the adaptations world over, I'm not talking about India, even if you see the classics that have been adapted across the world, the medium demands that you change certain things because the two things are very different. When a reader reads a book, he has a different kind of he's on a different journey. And the same thing when a viewer is watching it on the screen, he's on a different experience altogether. So here we are talking about two different kinds of mediums which require very, very different treatment. So obviously, the producer will find it difficult to stick to the written words, so adhere to it word by word. he will make changes. While doing the screenplay, they do make changes. And I'm okay with that because I understand that I can understand the written media, but I don't understand the other medium. Right. I won't really know what goes into filmmaking, the intricacies, the details, the technical parts. So I don't interfere. And once I have signed away the book, I really don't want to get into that field at all because then I will never be at peace with myself. I'll always be wondering what are they going to do with my story? How will it translate? What will the viewers think? So I just leave it. I think there's something wrong with Mohona's network.
Hello, ma'am. Am I audible?
Audible? Yeah, now you are.
Yes. Okay. Um, Congratulations to you, ma'am, once again for like having your book converted. It's a really great thing, I believe, because now so many people would now know your those who didn't knew before. They would also know come to know about your story, and they would definitely read it. And I'm really very happy for you, ma'am. So congratulations once again. Now my question is for Sutapa ma'am. Ma'am, you have written mythological fictions like Rudraksha, When Gods Came Calling. Dandakarana as a place is feared because of the adversities associated with it. The identity of the place continues to be the memory of Lord Rama going there during his exile period, and the place was full of Rakshasa and wild animals. In this respect, how do you think the mythologies associated with a place can put an influence on its reality? Does mythology put a barrier of fear in the minds of people, thus leading to the dejection of the place or people? Over to you, ma'am.
So Mohana, I think the the stories or the myths or the legends which revolve around a place do play on people's mind, and they do influence them. For example, look at Kurukshetra. Kurukshetra commands hordes of pilgrims simply because apparently it's a sacred place. So, but I mean, we know that the war in Mahabharat was fought over there, but we still, I don't know. There is, I mean, there may be a lot of research and facts that actually a war did happen in Kurukshetra, but the kind of sacredness that is attached to Kurukshetra is probably a part of the of Mahabharat, which is actually a mythology which has been written by somebody, right? Historically, I don't know how much of it has been actually proved. Same way, this Dandakarnya is actually the Dandak forest is supposed to be the abode of the Dandak demon, right? That's what mythology says. And the name means a jungle of punishment. This actually, the location is in Bastar district, and it has some, if you like if you sort of take a look at it on the internet, it has got some beautiful temples, many of them dedicated to Lord Shiva. It has got lovely caves, where you can go, and it's got beautiful waterfalls. One is a horseshoe waterfall, so it's actually a very beautiful place. But what is really happening there right now? There is violence, right? The Maoist forces are fighting the central forces over there. So I don't know, and it's the poor villagers who live there who are actually suffering because of the violence. So I don't know whether it is because of the mythology or the legend or the myths attached to it, but it is definitely not a peaceful place, as of now, at least.
Thank you so much, man, for this wonderful insight. You have like really showed what is the problem with the reality and mythology and the connection. Like we people normally tend to connect both of them, but is there really a connection? It's just a connection made by in the mind of we ourselves. We just create a connection, and that does have an influence and impact the lives of the common people of that place, or about it also influence the future and both the present of that place. And this is something we should keep in our mind before judging a place or just putting a notion on it. So now I'd like to proceed to the last question, which happens to be a common question that is being addressed to both of you. Are authors ever fearful of the acceptability of their writings? Editing the manuscript is often stressful. Other than that, a constant change in socio-political situation at times lead to certain aspects of the stories feeling unrelatable to the contemporary audience. How do you both handle these aspects? Over to you. For Tanushri ma'am, please go ahead with this answer, and after that, Shitpa ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Mohana, like I mentioned before, there's always that fear. I wonder if there is any author who does not feel the anxiety before the book hits the market, or after it hits the market. It's like the Friday opening of movies. The stars are on the tenterhooks. Similarly, authors are on tenterhooks. So I think that fear is quite natural because you have put in so much passion, time, and energy into a project. Now it's a baby, and no one wants the baby to be rejected. You always want the baby to be appreciated. So when you give birth to a baby, you want everyone to say, "Oh, how sweet, how sweet." And anyone who says, "How ugly, how stupid," you will get really angry and you wouldn't like it. So it's the same with the authors, I think. We do fear the reception in the market. And while we are editing it, there always that fear that you missed out on something. Maybe you could have done it better, even thereafter. So I remember once I had remarked in an interview, there was this newspaper reporter who came and asked me, "Do you revisit your novels?" I said, "Definitely not, because if I did, I would find 100 faults with it, and I would want to redo it in a very different manner, because our perceptions change. Even when we are reading a classic, each time I read it, I find a whole new facet which I had left before. I find a whole new, dimension to the story which I had not realized earlier. So how would I face this? Wouldn't I face the same kind of feeling while reading my book? So it really helps me if I distance myself once the book is over. I don't want to go and, tear, analyze, and, reference to it every moment of my life. I'm on to the next. So, but the fear is palpable before its release and during the last stage of editing, as well as the initial reception. It is there.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing with us this psychology that every author goes through, and I can totally understand. Though I have never written anything, but I can understand this fear and this pain that you guys go through. Thank you so much for sharing this experience. And now I would like to invite Shutaba ma'am to share her experience. Over to you, ma'am.
So, Mona, I completely agree with Tanushri that how much ever, I might labor, put in my passion, and, I want to touch the reader with my authenticity in writing, poignancy, or passion of telling the tale. I can never know for sure whether I've succeeded or not until the book is read by the readers. And in fact, what makes a book a winner or a loser is actually a mystery. You will find award winning books fall by the wayside, and a book which may not seem special is cherished as far as popular readership goes. So, as far as fear, yes, very much it is there. And the fear has different stages. The first fear is when you are handing the book over to the publisher. And I always, my email goes fingers crossed because you never know what the publisher might think of the book. You may think it's wonderful, but the publisher might cut back and say, no, no, see, this is not going to work and this is not going to work. The other time is when a book goes to the beta reader, which I very, you know, strictly do, I would say. I do give out my book to beta readers. And the thing is that while I am afraid, sometimes the beta reader has come back with extremely good feedback, extremely valuable feedback. And I have incorporated those. And I think, I mean, to a great extent, what my beta readers have said, whether it was Padmavati, Genghis Khan, Nadir Shah, or any other book that I have given, I have found that their feedback has built my book, has really, enhanced the storytelling. So that is another time when I feel scared. And of course, when the book is released, I'm constantly asking my publisher, well, is it selling? Is it selling? He always says, why are you scared so much? But then, yeah, I am scared. I am nervous every time a book comes out. And as Tanushri said, every book is your baby and you want that to succeed. So obviously you're always afraid, for your baby to fail. So that fear is always there. And I just wanted to add over here socio-political situations. Well, I would give Padmavati as a case study because while the movie Padmavat got so much criticism, but even today Padmavati is really running strong, doing very well with the readers. I don't know whether it's because of the socio political conventions or despite those conventions. But yes, as I said earlier also, you have to be very careful when you're doing a historical novel. At the same time, I want to add here something that we should not, as authors, we are expressing our point of view. Everybody doesn't need to agree with that. So we also need to be a little thick skinned and take criticism or critical reviews as they come. In fact, I would say that if a person has critically reviewed, I mean, a good critical review of your book, it shows that the person has actually analyzed what you want to say. And that makes you feel good because you are saying something, you have a voice there, right, through your book. And if a person is reading it so thoroughly and analyzing that and then putting up a critical review, I think that review also has a lot of worth, a lot of value, and helps us as writers to grow. So probably the next book you do, you will think, I think this is how I should do it because this is what the reviewer had said about the earlier book. So I think we will just grow. Constructive criticism always makes you grow, and I welcome it actually.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Today we have got to learn so much from both of you. You have showed us how to take constructive criticism and work in that way to improve ourselves. And both of your works sounds very much interesting, and that's why I couldn't help but ask both of you that what are you guys writing now, and what upcoming projects are you, we can show expect from you guys. Please, like, I really can't hold back on my curiosity, and I'm asking this that what is your about upcoming book, and what else are you guys writing right now? Please share that with us. Yes, Tanushri, man.
Actually, I have a sequel to Spooky Stories coming up, and it should be out this year, sometime in October or November. So it's a further, progress on the same field. And there's also another historical coming up, which should be out in the next, say, by early next year. And as for working, I'm still debating whether I should start working on a different genre altogether. But having said that, I would love to do a sci-fi, which I have been wanting to do for a long time. But I haven't zeroed on to the project as yet because generally I take a long break between my books. So I'm taking that break now and still, debating on the next subject.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Like, we are really, as audience, we are really interested in the release of your upcoming book. And now I'd request Shutapa ma'am to share about her upcoming projects. Over to you, ma'am.
So the book which is already gone to the publisher is again on the historical track, but it's a book for young readers. So, and I have this tiny superstition of not talking about WIP, work in progress. So I'm not going to say too much about it. But like Tanushri also said, I'm also very fond of writing in different genres. Because every time you write in a different genre, every genre has its own restrictions, its own style of narration. And that poses a challenge. And I love those challenges that I get because I feel that my writing is enhanced as a writer. My, the way I write and how I write is enhanced every time I write in a different genre. I study how the genre is, study other books in that genre, read them, and then decide that this is how I'm going to write mine. So that is something that I completely agree with Tanushri, that I also love to write in different genres. So I, like I said, this translating Takuma Julie was a challenge, a huge challenge, but I took it, and I'm so glad that I did it. So this is generally, and I think, I'm sure, because I usually come out with a book a year. So probably there will be also another book which will be coming out at the beginning of next year. So
That sounds extremely great, ma'am. We are eagerly waiting for your new release, and I would like to wish all the best to both of you for your upcoming releases. And I would say to our audience that the those books that you have already in the market, all this seems to be a must read for all the thriller and horror fans out there. So now I'd like to conclude the session. First, I'd like to thank both our panelists for very insightful conversation this evening. Today's session was the concluding session for the panel discussion series under the Project 9, the Story Project 9, Dandakaranna. This series has been an absolutely amazing and memorable experience for me. Tell Me Your Story calls for submission of poetry and short stories on the writing from Dandakaranya. Everyone stay well, stay safe, stay happy. Good night.
thank you so much. Tell me your story, and Mohana. Lovely chat, and thank you so much, Tanushri, for being here with us. And it was wonderful. And thank you, all the viewers. Take care.
Thank you
Good
very
evening.
much.
Thank you so much, Sutapa. I really had a whale of a time, and it was nice discussing all the fears and being a little bolder every time we tackled another book and a question. So, and thank you, Mohana, for putting it all together. And thanks to Tell Me Your Story, as well as the audience who had the patience to, remain with us till the end of the show. Thank you all very much.